The movie opens with Tess, the school guidance counselor, questioning a student about who sexually harassed her in the school. After she finally speaks up saying that it was the principal who did that to her, Tess takes the student to him to make it clear to him that his deeds are now known. Later, when Tess arrives home with her husband, Roger, and son Mason, she sees the principal sitting in her living room with her family photos displayed in front of him and a gun in his hand. They try talking him out of doing any harm to them, but then he gets furious and points the gun at them. 7 years later, we see Tess in her big sister's boxing class. Nora has been her support since her loss. After the class, she visits Mason at the graveyard. She drops a hat for Mason and tells him about the public reading engagement she has this evening. She is expecting Roger to be there because he had mentioned he will be coming. At the reading, Tess shares the story of how she lost her family when she helped the principal from hurting other girls. The movie then plays back to when the principal came to their house with a gun. Tess and Roger manage to let him allow Mason go upstairs. The principal then begs Tess not to report him, but she says that's her only option. Roger attempts to make her reconsider for the safety of their family, but she makes it clear to them that she isn't going to change her mind. The principal is upset and fires 2 shots in the air. He then points the gun to his head and fires 2. Shortly after, Tess realizes that she's not hearing Mason. They see that the gunshots the principal fired landed on the walls of his room. Roger quickly rushes upstairs and finds Mason dead. At the reading, Tess states how healing from her loss has helped her figure out her mission in life. After the reading and the blood donation, Nora extends her sympathy regarding Roger's absence. As soon as she leaves to get coffee, a military guy approaches Tess saying her blog helped him a great deal when he was overseas. He introduces himself as Connell Winters. He then offers to take her to have some tea in her favorite restaurant. They get to know themselves more, and it turns out that they have many things in common. He mentions that his captain, who he saw as a dad, was killed in a town they went to stabilize. Connell ends up following Tess to her house and they get way too personal. The next morning, while Tess and Connell are in bed, Roger shows up with flowers to apologize for not showing up yesterday. Connell quietly listens to Tess and Roger's conversation. Roger wants another chance to be with Tess and promises to never leave her like in the past. Soon, they hear a sound from the room and find the dressing mirror broken. Tess meets Connell in a restaurant and tells him they can't be together because she's getting back with Roger. Connell doesn't take it lightly since he told her things that no one knew about him. Tess then apologizes for her actions, but he says nothing and walks away. Later that night, Tess joins Roger in his house for dinner. They remind themselves of the love they once shared and plan to visit Mason tomorrow. Connell sees them and out of anger and jealousy, he smacks Roger's trash can. He then goes home and watches Tess' family photo and a bag of blood with Tess' name written on it. "What are you planning, Roger?" The next day after visiting Mason, Tess stops by at the hospital to see her doctor. She wants to go off her medication because she feels a lot better now. The doctor quickly notices her sudden happiness and good health and links it to Roger showing up in her life again. Tess admits it, but her happiness turns into panic when she sees Connell staring at her from the parking lot. As soon as she steps out of the building, Connell approaches her and tells her how much he misses her. He wants to have another time with her, but she shuts him up and joins Roger. Tess then asks Roger if she can stay at his place for the night and he agrees. Connell shows up at Tess' support group and asks if he can join and tell his story too. A member of the group offers him a chair, but Tess calls him aside and drives him out. When Tess arrives home, she sees Roger with Connell. Roger introduces Connell to Tess saying he is his neighbor who moved in months ago. When Connell leaves, Tess tries telling Roger she knows Connell already, but they hear a knock on the door and she stops. It's Nora and her husband. Roger invited them over to spend some time together like they did years ago when they were together. When Tess is left alone with Nora, she tells Nora that Connell has been Roger's neighbor for months and she knew nothing about it. She further tells her that he has been stalking her. Nora listens to all that and suggests that she reports it to the police. While Roger is fast asleep, Tess calls Connell and tells him it's over between them and he should back off. But he reminds her of the night they shared together and urges her to come clean with Roger about this. The next morning, Roger is about to go to work when he sees that the body of his car is sprayed and the window is gone. He checks inside the car and all his stuff is intact. Tess suspects Connell did it, so she suggests they report it immediately, but he says he's already late for work and drives away. Some time later, Tess visits Mason and upon her arrival, she sees Mason's stone had been defaced. She quickly takes a picture of it to show to Roger. Later, Tess hits the gym to train up a bit. Roger shows up with Connell saying he has a match with him. He prefers to be hit by a man instead of Nora. Tess tries talking him out of it, but he says he can handle it. When they get into the ring, Connell whoops the hell out of Roger's ass. Nora and Tess pull him out before things could get out of hand. Later that night, Tess comes clean to Roger on what happened between her and Connell. She is convinced that Connell is responsible for what happened to Roger's car and Mason's stone, and also that he cunningly accepted the fight so he can beat the hell out of him. Roger promises to be by her side and now says that they report it to the police. Connell, who is stalking them, hears this and is furious. The next day, Tess and Roger go to the police station and tell the detective everything. The detective checks for info on Connell and finds out he had been to the station early this morning to file a restraining order against Tess. Soon Connell arrives at the station. He narrates his version, saying that Tess was the one who asked for their relationship, and after breaking up with her, she continued to pester him to spend time with her. He further states that he didn't want to do that with her, but she harassed him severally and even moved to Roger's house in order to get close to him. As evidence, Tess also brings out her phone in an attempt to show the detective what Connell wrote on Mason's tombstone. She checks the phone for a minute but doesn't find the picture anywhere. Connell is then allowed to leave without any restrictions, but with Tess, his restraining order granted against her until she proves her points. Tess and Roger arrive home only to see the words, "Connected," written with blood on their wall. The detective arrives and takes a sample of it to test if it's Tess or Connell's blood. Let's hope it's not Tess's blood. You recall the bag of blood we saw in Connell's refrigerator. When the detective leaves, Roger asks Tess to go shower and relax from all what's happening. Tess does exactly that. She sips some wine and while seemingly relaxed, Connell shows up and offers to join her in the shower. Tess starts screaming. A few seconds later, she comes in and realizes it wasn't Connell. Roger sees a bottle of pills by her side and inquires if she's on medication. Roger is ready to help her out of this trauma, but she says she's fine. The next day, the detective pays them a visit with the test results, and it shows that Tess's blood is what was used on the wall. She tries explaining that there was a blood donation and Connell might have stolen her blood from there, but they pay no attention to what she's saying and ask her to see her therapist. Later, when Connell isn't around, Tess sneaks into his house and finds information about Connell. It shows that he is ordered to discharge from his duties for assaulting a fellow civilian by the name Marcus Lyle. Tess quickly leaves, on a quest to find out who Marcus is. She arrives at his house and introduces herself as a reporter. Marcus doesn't want to have any conversation with reporters, so Tess tells him the real reason why she came looking for him. Marcus is open to talk once she mentions Connell. He mentions that Connell had wanted to kill the whole family who killed their captain. Marcus held him and advised him to quit because the captain isn't his dad. Connell got furious hearing the statement Marcus made. He smashed Marcus' knee with his M4 and cut his neck with his knife. Marcus further explains that Connell's real dad worked at a school and he committed suicide because he got into some trouble. Immediately, Tess realizes why Connell always said they are connected. His dad was the principal that killed himself in Tess's home. Connell has been pursuing revenge. Tess returns home, grabs an old newspaper which is about the principal's death and shows it to Connell, saying she has found the truth about him. He is angry now, saying he'll take everything away from her. He immediately lets her go when Roger and Nora see him threatening her. Tess tells them all what she found and the plan she has about secretly recording him when he threatens her, so that she can present it to the detective, but Roger stops her from doing it, stating that it's too risky. That night, Tess wakes up from a nightmare and sees Roger entering Connell's house to settle matters with him. Connell sights Tess looking at them and gives an evil smile. He closes the windows and starts attacking Roger. Tess calls the police to inform them about it, and in no time, 2 gunshots are heard. Tess breaks into Connell's house to look for Roger, but he is nowhere to be found. The police arrive and take her away for breaking into Connell's house. They later find Roger's blood in Tess's car. At the station, Tess explains to the detective she's innocent, but he tells her that Connell isn't smart enough to plan and execute all these since he barely graduated from high school. The next morning, with the police still at Connell's house, Nora secured Tess's release by using their house and gym as guarantees. Nora affirms that everything will be alright and takes her to Roger's house. They then map out a plan on how to trap Connell. Tess dresses like Nora and leaves the house. Connell then pulls out his knife and walks towards the house. He watches Nora, who is disguised as Tess, for a while and leaves. While he's driving, Tess appears behind him and points a gun at him with an order to take her to Roger. Tess texts Nora their location when they get to her house where he kept Roger, with the gun still pointing at Connell. She unties Roger only for things to flip as Roger takes the gun from her and points it at her. Roger got Connell on his side to take revenge on her for being the cause of Mason's death. Nora arrives just when he is about to kill her. Roger steps out pretending to be hurt. He knocks her out after finding out she hadn't put the police in the know, and drags her into a different room. Tess pleads with Connell not to kill her. She tells him that Roger is just using him and he will get rid of him also when he's done with her. She reminds him of how much his dad loved him and urges him to be a good son for his dad. Just then, Roger appears and points the gun at Tess to end her life. Connell interferes and he shoots him out of his way. Tess quickly grabs his knife and jabs it into his feet. She swiftly grabs his gun and shoots him when he attempts to stab her with the knife. The police arrive with an ambulance and take Connell to the hospital. The detective, listening to Connell's testimony, apologizes for not believing her. Days later, Tess visits Mason and tells him the good news about her book being accepted and going into publication. At the end of the movie, Tess holds another reading which Connell attends.